Shalom. All praises to the Heavenly Father. Hatun Apuku Yah. Praise be to the earthly mother, the Pachamama, and all of her earthly angels, the Huaca. Praise be to the Holy Spirit, the Kahe, in the name of Hamashiach, Motsah the Lamb, unification to the nation. So, brothers, we are going to continue our discussion on West Africa. Now, I'm not going to necessarily focus on the Iduma and the Edo. That's probably for next video, where we will finish discussing their history. But we are going to discuss these different nations that seem to have benefited greatly off of the transatlantic slave trade. Now, I don't really believe that the transatlantic slave trade happened how they're making it or saying that it happened. I do think people were transported to and from Brazil, as well as to and from the West Indies. But I believe the majority of the people were transported to other parts of the world, like southern India or the Pacific Islands. That's also part of the slave trade that the Portuguese were doing. And it's not really talked about. Now, that's not what this video is about. But again, that's how I believe that the transatlantic, or really that slave trade during that time, how it went down. Barely anyone came as a slave, and I mean like pretty much the children of Israel. I don't think they came directly from West Africa. If they are from there, then they went to the West Indies first, then they went to North America. But that's not a very lucrative enterprise, so I don't see why there will be more of them coming over to the Americas because of how the oceans move. But particularly that's not really happening directly from Africa to North America. Now, I'm not fully on board with many of these aboriginal theorists, and Dan Calloway, he has great research and stuff, but I think that they don't account for certain things, in my opinion, of course. But anyway, we are going to talk about these different nations in West Africa that have benefited greatly off of the slave trade. Now, we're going to start off with the with the Edo people of Benin. Not too much into them, but the Oba Esige of Benin, the great king of Benin in Nigeria, who commissioned metallic arts, founder of the city of Onitsha, and the first West African leader to establish diplomatic relations with an European country. Now, this was during the 1500s, right? Well, you know what was happening in the 1500s in the Americas? People were getting mass slaughtered in Mexico, mass raped, mass pillaged. Las Casas, he even said that there has not been a scene that he thinks will ever happen in the rest of the world that happened in Mexico. He doesn't think that there ever will be a massacre like that. How the blood was 6 feet high with all the massacring that the Spanish were doing. So let's see what was happening on this side of the world while that was happening on that side of the world. So Oba Esigi, excuse me if I'm saying this wrong, was the first king of Benin who ascended the throne with the title SCG in about 1504. Trade in ivory, Benin cloths, and beads, etc. flourished between the Benin Kingdom and Portugal. Although Oba Esige was the first leader in West African sub-region to establish diplomatic relationship with a European country, and his son was the first accredited African envoy to Portugal court. Traditional history also recalls how the Europeans had tried in vain during his reign to gain access into the hinterland, which they suspected to be very rich in natural resources. But the powerful king of Benin gave a capital no to the request. Onitsha, a city in the eastern part of Nigeria, was founded by his people. His mother, Idea, was the famous warrior queen immortalized in the brilliantly carved face mask adopted as a symbol of Festak. So the reason why I'm reading this is because how come this king of Benin can say no? And how come these people are bowing to them? How come the Portuguese came and bowed to them, but over in the Americas, they weren't bowing to anyone? They were fighting millions of people. They had conquest on their minds, but over here, they're trying to be diplomatic. That tells you where the Holy Lands are. That tells you who these people are. Let me read this. I put it in the... I don't know if you guys can see this, but it says, he was the first king of Benin who ascended the throne with the title Asigi in about 1504. Trade in ivory, Benin cities, and beads, etc. flourished. I can't really see this, but I think I already read this. Yeah, this is pretty much what it said earlier. Let's skip down. Onitsha in eastern Nigeria was founded by the Edo, during the Oba Esigi's reign. The Portuguese, a major European power at the time, happily negotiated and established diplomatic and trade relations with him and his kingdom, Benin. The first such relationship between a West African country and a European country. His son was the first accredited African envoy to the Portuguese court. Again, I wonder why these people are so confederate with each other. We're going to get into more of that. His son was first, I already read that, one of the numerous elite palace associations was assigned the responsibility of conducting affairs with the Portuguese. Until this day, a secret language, which some claim is derived from a mixture of Portuguese and Edo languages, is spoken by members of the association. Wow, they're real close to the point where they mixing languages. Are you kidding me? And this wasn't done through colonization. No. That's not why this was done. That's madness, bro. Portuguese mercenaries fought alongside the Beni in many territorial wars after the treaty. Trade between the Portuguese and Benin was mainly in coral beads, cloths for ceremonial attire, and great quantities of brass manillas, which Benin craftsmen melted for casting. In exchange for Portuguese goods, the Benin offered tobacco, spices, kola nuts, ivory, earthenware, jewelry, artifacts, woven Kai materials, etc. Exploiting their cordial trading relationship with Edo people, Alfonso de Avero and other Portuguese agents aroused Oba Esigi's interest in the possibility of acquiring firearms from Portugal for future campaigns. There was, however, a catch. Manuel, the Portuguese king, wrote Asige, explaining to him that when we see that you have embraced the teachings of Christianity like a good and faithful Christian, there will be nothing within our realms which we shall not be glad to favor you, whether it be arms or cannon and all other weapons of war for use against your enemies. Of such things we have a great store, as your ambassador, Dom Jorg, will inform you. So they were out to pretty much colonize everyone and to evangelize their religion. But again, why did they force it on the people of the Americas and certain other groups? And why did they work with them? They weren't necessarily ODing, trying to force it on them like that. They were just like, listen, like, we can't really do that unless you're a Christian, but, we respect you. Like, why are they giving them so much respect? If this is just the white people enslaved the Africans, that's not how it went down. First of all, many of these Portuguese, they're mulatto. A good amount of them were so-called white looking. but they're also mulatto looking as well, right? We're also going to get into why a lot of these Portuguese people were mulatto looking in the first place. Let me see. Europeans' slave trade in West Africa started with the acquisition of domestic servants in 1522. The warrior kingdoms like Benin had plenty of them captured as war booties, but would not sell them. So they kept the slaves instead of selling them. Like, they just wanted them to themselves. The slave trade was very unpopular with the Edo people. They thought it was silly to sell fellow human beings, but they had no problem with doing business with them. Anyway, I don't even know if that's even true, but we'll take their word for it for now. Their obas and nobles were vehemently opposed to the business of slave trade and to the export of productive fighting males. The Edo, of course, could not control the day-to-day happenings of the slave merchants, who apparently largely acted under cover at first in the vast territories under Edo hegemony. However, it was forbidden to sell or take a native Beni into slavery, and so elaborate identification marks on faces and chests were eventually contrived. The Beni, therefore, were hardly ever captured by Arabs or Europeans into slavery. So those people were protected. They're saying, well, they didn't engage in it, but they just pretty much stayed out the way. However, they did engage in slavery. They're saying it was unpopular, but they did it at the beginning. They sold people at the beginning. They just didn't do it for that long. So after, I guess, they expelled whomever were there, they were just like, okay, we're done. Yes, we've made enough money. That's pretty much what happened. So let's continue. Now, I believe that these people, and I believe that this is actually probably, if they're not the biblical land of Seir, they are pretty much the expelled inhabitants of Seir. And this is who they are. And Jeremiah chapter 25, verse 20 talks about them. Check it. And all the mingled people, and all the kings of the land of Uz, and all the kings of the land of the Philistines, and Ashkelon, and Azza, and Ekron, and the remnant of Ashdod, Edom, Moab, and the children of Ammon, and all the kings of Tyrus, and all the kings of Zidon, and all the kings of the isles which are beyond the sea. This is talking about all of those different nations, whether they be in West Africa, North Africa, the Middle East, Ethiopia, the Greek islands, all those scattered islands or the islands of the Gentiles, Spain, England. It's talking about all those different places that came over here and conspired. And all the kings of Arabia, and all the kings of the mingled people that dwell in the deserts. So all of these are the mingled people. The mingled people, all the kings of the land of Uz, the Philistines, Edom, Moab, and the children of Ammon. These are all the mingled people. These are all mingled people too. All the kings of Arabia, wherever that is. All the kings that dwell in the desert. All the kings of Zimri, and all the kings of Elam, and all the kings of the Medes. That's over there in Eastern, Southern Asia, or wherever. India. This was a worldwide confederacy. Now, Uz, there's two Uz or Huzzes. There's one that comes from Aram, that's the one that Job came from, and there's the one that comes from Seir, which is what that was talking about. And this word, its root word comes from to take counsel together, or to take advice, to counsel, to plan. That is what this word comes from. And this is exactly what happened in the west coast of Africa. Many of these different kings and nations, they were mass selling people. I just don't think they came to the Americas like that. Some of them did, but the majority of them, I don't see that they came to the Americas, bro. So this is the Treaty of Tordesillas. I forgot how to say that, bro. Someone said in the video. Or Tordesillas. Anyway, this is the line of demarcation that the Portuguese and the Spanish agreed with. So the Pope pretty much said, from this point to the left, up into this point over here, belongs to the Spanish. And this point to the right, up till here, belongs to the Portuguese. As you can see, that's why Brazil speaks Portuguese. That's why there's a sort of Creole that's here. They brought people from West Africa to South Africa. They brought the Jews that were in Spain and Portugal to South Africa, to West Africa. That's why they did it. At the very beginning, they brought them to the West Indies. They also traded some people from Eastern Africa, traded them to Southern India, traded them to the Pacific Islands. So you can't go by, like, E1B1A equals this. Like, that is so idiotic. And it's low-key disrespectful to those people who were... Oh, man. And some of this stuff, man, made me tear up. Because this stuff was really horrible, what these people did. Anyway, let's keep going. Christopher Columbus's first voyage to the Americas threatened to intensify the rivalry between the Catholic kingdoms of Spain, Castile, and Portugal into open warfare. Both kingdoms wanted to claim all newly discovered lands that were not Christian, that is, not Catholic. The line of demarcation was Pope Alexander IV's solution to this problem. He issued the Bull of Demarcation to prevent Spain and Portugal from battling over new territories, with resources such as gold. The bull successfully prevented a war between Spain and Portugal in the 16th century. Neither the Pope nor the Spanish or the Portuguese actually knew what this line was dividing. The knowledge of the lands west of Europe was sketchy, and most people thought that the land Columbus had reached was part of Asia. Anyway, should I read the rest of this? Yeah, maybe I actually should. The Pope may have believed that the Spanish would reach the same land sailing west over the Atlantic. No, he didn't, bro. He knew where he was sending people, bro. I do not believe that for 1 second. When Columbus returned from the Americas, he stopped in Portugal before going back to the court of Ferdinand V and Isabella I of Spain. King João II of Portugal claimed the lands Columbus told him about, even though the explorer had sailed for the Spanish monarchs. Ferdinand and Isabella appealed to Pope Alexander IV, a Spaniard, for a solution. He issued the Inter Ciatria, the papal bull of demarcation, which was very biased towards Spain. This document conferred all non-Christian lands found west of the designed or designated line to Spain to explore and convert to Christianity. Portugal was to have all non-Christian lands east of the line. This decree in principle shut the Portuguese out of the Americas. Dissatisfied, the Portuguese appealed to both the Pope and Spain. 2 more papal bulls followed. See how these heathens, like, they're arguing over our lands. That's just what they're doing. Thing is, they've visited Africa before. Like, they've already found, Roman artifacts in both East and West Africa. There's even some in South Africa. So these people knew of Africa. They even have maps that are old enough for them to know about Africa. They knew. It's the heathen that did not know about the interiors of Africa. Like, they didn't know about the Old Testament lands like that, pretty much. Whether they're in the Americas, Africa, or all the way Eastern Asia, Southeast Asia, wherever, they didn't really know about these lands. but they did know about, the fact that there was more land south of the Sahara Desert. Like, they knew that. The Bull of Demarcation and later decrees gave rights to colonize, exploit, and convert all non-Christian territory to Catholicism. These treaties treated all newly discovered nations and people as property and regarded all non-Christian governments the Catholic explorers found. Later, the church realized, so if this is the case, how come they were willing to work with these Africans? How come they were willing to work with these people of Benin? How come they were willing to work with them? How come they forced their hand upon them at the very beginning? How come? While the rest of the Israelites, while the Aztecs got taken over, while the Taino got slaughtered and taken over, they were trying to cut deals with them. How come? How come they didn't try to cut deals with the Taino? That's how you know who the Israelites are. So no, it's not all black people. Not at all, man. Later, the church realized these bulls were the cause of the enslavement and brutalization of native peoples, and tried to emphasize peaceful, What the hell? Oh no, bro. Listen, man. They knew exactly what they were doing. And at a later date, I'm gonna make a video about how they knew exactly what they were doing. Ridiculous. But I'm gonna have to pause this. I have to set up for work. So I'm gonna probably finish this when I get off. Okay, and we're back. Okay, so this is me about 8 hours later after work. So let's finish this video. So now we're speaking on how the language of the Edo people of Nigeria made its way into Portuguese Creole. Wait a minute, hold on. Oh, hold on. So you mean to tell me that these people who had such a small role in the slave trade, however it occurred on the west coast of Africa, and the heinous things that were happening that we're going to read about, you mean to tell me that their language got tied into Portuguese Creole and they barely had anything to do with it? Yeah, I believe that. Sure, I believe that. And these people are so prevalent even today. So let's read on this. In 1472, during one of the Portuguese voyages along the coast of West Africa, the Portuguese explorer Rui de arrived on the coast of the Niger Delta in present-day Nigeria. It was an area controlled by the powerful Kingdom of Benin, located in the hinterland north of the Delta. The kingdom was not known to the Europeans at the time, and this was the first time any European has ever reached this area. Again, not true. But anyway, let's continue. After a decade, another Portuguese explorer, Alfonso de Alvario, that sounds like Alvaro, which sounds like Alvaro. That's the descendant of Edom. That's one of the descendants of Edom. Interesting. Ventured into the Delta to visit Benin. The Portuguese had heard stories about Benin that compelled them to breach their customary adherence to border harbors and take the risk of venturing into the Delta. When Alvario reached Benin in 1486, what he found was a large and advanced country with a city comparable to those in Europe. The people of the Kingdom of Benin, the Edo people, lived in a city and towns run by a centralized and sophisticated bureaucracy. The roads were wide, long, and straight, with huge metal lamps hanging many feet high to provide light at night. The people lived in large houses with courtyards dressed in beautiful cloth made in the kingdom. Alvario was astounded by the high level of organization and wealth of the country, and described it as the great city of Benin. He quickly established a diplomatic and trade relationship between Portugal and Benin, and stayed behind as Portugal's emissary in the kingdom. Also, the king of Benin sent several emissaries, from Benin to Portugal at different times. This relationship between the Portuguese and Edo people in the region shaped the Pidgin spoken. That's a language, okay, in the Niger Delta region today, and also, what may surprise to many, Portuguese Creole. And they're saying that is pretty much why it happened. We don't really know why it happened, but we do know that they were pretty damn close. The Edo and the Portuguese. So all this stuff about them saying, well, they didn't really sell slaves. Well, they sure as hell were real friendly with the Portuguese. Real friendly. As if it's two brothers teaming up or something. And by brothers, I'm not talking about Jacob and Esau. I'm talking about Esau and Esau. The language of the Edo people is still the major African component of Portuguese Creole. The Gulf of Guinea Creoles are the main Portuguese Creole languages still spoken today. There are a few other Portuguese Creoles spoken by a few thousand people in Malaysia, Sri Lanka, India, Singapore, and Indonesia. Several studies have shown, though, that the Edo language is the major African component that constitutes the foundation of the Creoles in the Gulf of Guinea. At least one variety of these Creoles is spoken in Sao Tome and Principe in Equatorial Guinea, with diaspora speakers mainly in Angola and Portugal, according to the Atlantis of Pidgin and Creole languages structures. A linguistic, alas, that provides expert-based information on 130 grammatical and lexical features of 76 Pidgin and Creole languages from around the world. The Creoles of the Gulf of Guinea were derived from the combination of the Portuguese language, Edo language, including closely related Edoid languages in the Niger Delta, and Bantu languages, mainly Kikongo and Kimbuntu, according to linguists. The Creoles emerged from a first contact language, or Pidgin, resulting from the contact between Portuguese colonizers and the slaves from the kingdom of Benin in Sao Tome. Now again, these people, the Edo people, were not selling their own people. They never did that. That was strictly not allowed. They sold other people. They were rubbing shoulders with the Portuguese, as we can see this. Okay. The Bantu languages came in contact with the newly formed Portuguese Edo language in the island some decades later. Bro, this stuff is crazy, bro. And people really tried to say that these people had nothing to do with this? Really? Why would you share a language with the colonizers? You must be on their same level. They must have that much respect for you. This didn't come from colonization like it did for the Mexicans or the Puerto Ricans or the Jamaicans or anything like that. This came from like a sort of like friendly relationship. Benin abolished slavery in the mid-16th century, leading to the rise in slaves to Sao Tome from Congo and Angola. Earlier in 1471, Portuguese explorers Pedro Escobar and João de Santarém were the first Europeans to find the uninhabited island of Sao Tome, located south of the Niger Delta, and later established a permanent settlement there in 1493. The settlers acquired slaves through the trade with Benin to work on the island, first as servants during the short homestead period, and later as labor for their plantations, until the mid-16th century, when Benin banned the sale of slaves. As a result, the plantation owners forced on importing slaves from the present-day Democratic Republic of Congo and Angola, and the number of Bantu slaves began to increase significantly on the island. The Bantu slaves rapidly became the dominant slave population in the islands, and their language made its way into the Creole. The slave trade between the Portuguese and the Kingdom of Congo and modern-day Angola was at first welcomed by the reigning monarch, Alfonso I, in the early 1500s, but would eventually lead to the downfall of the kingdom when the future kings were unable to protect their people from British, Portuguese, and Dutch slave traders. They had initially sold slaves from prisoners of war. So, is the Congo kingdom, is that an Israelite kingdom? Are the Benin kingdoms and the Edo kingdoms, are they Israelite kingdoms? We know that there's Israelites there, but are they Israelite kingdoms? And the biggest place where they sold slaves was in that same area of Ghana where they had that quote-unquote kingdom of Judah or Ayuda. That is the biggest slave port. So this is coming together a little bit too well. So the only kingdom that belonged to some sort of Israelite kingdom, the kingdom of Judah, was the capital place of the slave port. And all these other kingdoms got rich and they were selling their own people, prisoners of war. What war? What war was happening? Is this history we can even find? Maybe the people in Africa, maybe they can let us know. But no, the kingdom of Congo and all these different kingdoms, they were not our people. And to me, they're quite obviously Edom, Moab, and the inhabitants of Seir, the Horites and the Hivites. That's what they are. You know? In a study, John Lathams, a linguistics expert in Portuguese-based Pidgin and Creole at the University of Westminster, explained that the grammatical process in which a sequence of meaningful word elements are composed has originated in an Edo noun prefix in the Creole of the Gulf of Guinea, and there is a higher portion of Edo contribution to other word classes such as adverbs, adjectives, I'm reading too fast, adjectives, verbs, and adverbs than nouns. Bro, this is really entrenched in the language. They were the colonizers. I am telling you that they were. I don't care what these people say when they're trying to diminish their role and say, oh, they just kept out of everyone's business and they just happened to not get touched at all. Really? They got touched. They did not get touched at all. Their people didn't get touched at all. No, there's something wrong here. I don't believe that. This, he said, suggests the Edo language played a more important or more specialized role than the Bantu language in the formation of the Creole, since the borrowing of adjectives, verbs, and adverbs from one language into another occurs less frequently than the borrowing of nouns. It's true, because that means that it's pretty much the foundation of the language. You could have little words here and there, like we do for Spanish, and it comes to the Nahuatl languages or the Quechuan languages where they have little words here and there. But this is the structure of the language, bro. Like, that's weird. That means that they were giving these people a language. That was the language to speak. Why would the slave language be the language that all the colonizers had to speak? That doesn't make any sense. The colonizers absorbed a little bit of the native languages, and the rest came from them. The same way how you have here with the American Indians. Some words in English are native words, maybe like 20 to 100, but the rest does not come from here. Same thing in Mexico and South America and all these different places in the islands and the Caribbean. But here, the Edo are the predominant language, pretty much. This Edo Portuguese language with a little bit of Bantu. No, bro, I don't believe that. There's something really wrong here. However, the number of speakers of the Gulf of Guinea Creole is rapidly declining, especially among the younger generations. The country of Sao Tome and Principe, has a population of how do you say his number? 219,000 people. It's estimated that the Sao Tome and Anguillar varieties of the Creole have about 60,000 speakers and 5,000 speakers respectively on the larger island Sao Tome. So let's go to the next article. Let's go to Alfonso the First. Who is this? You think this is an Israelite? Because some of these people came on my channel talking about how the Kingdom of Congo, how they actually colonized South America from early times, and I'm like, bro, that's the point, bro. Do you know where Idumea is? Idumea is all the regions of the lands of Judah. So that would include some of India, some of China, some of Ethiopia, some of Africa on the western or southern side, and Brazil, and Peru. You will see all these different cultures have some sort of similarities with each other. Even the dress of the West Africans, in particularly the Edo state, I'm seeing them dressed like that in Peru. So I'm thinking, okay, the tribe of Judah, they were just in West Africa. When it's much deeper than that. The tribe of Judah got conquered by West Africans. And that's the truth. And so did everywhere else. I've gone over already that the tribe of Judah pretty much had land around the coastlines. Whether it's Shanghai, China, that was conquered, a while ago. India also was conquered a while ago. But yes, the tribe of Judah, they had lands in all these different places. I even think that scripture was talking about, there shall be a stink instead of a sweet smell. I think it's actually, no disrespect, I think it's talking about the East Indian women. I honestly do. I'm talking about mainly like the Tamilian women from southern India. Because I think a lot of those people, or a good amount of those people, come actually from the tribe of Judah, believe it or not. But anyway, that's off topic. Let's continue. Alfonso the First of Congo, the ruler caught up in the slave trade. Alfonso I of Congo strategically pursued a close, mutually beneficial relationship with Portugal. At first, he collaborated in the slave trade, but later rejected it when it got out of control. Again, it's just like, it's the same thing. Oh, the Edo, they did it for a little bit, but then they felt bad. I guess they just said, we've eaten enough. We've made enough. Like, nah, bro. It don't work like that, man. I don't buy that. But Alfonso the First of Congo, born Vima Zinga in 1456, succeeded his father Jao I of Congo and ruled the Congo Kingdom from circa 1507 to circa 1542. While his father had welcomed the first Portuguese travelers, Alfonso I went further in embracing the religion at the expense of tradition. Some historians view this as a strategic move to ensure good relations with Portugal. Why the heck, bro? Why in the world would this powerful African kingdom pretty much bow before a group of mercenaries? This does not make sense, bro. This doesn't make sense, bro. And this is such an insult to my intelligence just reading this. So I'm a big, powerful kingdom, and some dirty Portuguese people come to me, and not only do I say, you know what? I'm going to accept your traditions. I'm also going to give you some of our daughters. You can intermarry with them. We could be one people. Now let's go get these Indians. That's pretty much what happened. That's crazy, bro. This is such an insult to my intelligence, bro. And brothers, it's an insult to yours too. You see this? They think you're stupid, man. We got the Holy Spirit now, though. However, he was mindful of keeping a mutually beneficial partnership with the Portuguese and showed negotiation skills through his many letters, which he wrote to King Manuel I and his successor João III, particularly once the slave trade got out of control. And again, bro, this is just not making sense to me. Like, these people roll up. Bro, do you know how hard it is to conquer someone, to go by some sort of naval fleet to the western coast of Africa and conquer them? So why were these people so fast to accept some sort of partnership between them. Like that is like this is just it's not making sense under any circumstance. I'm not letting someone roll up in my kingdom and tell me what to do. They knew about each other. And they knew what they came to do, and they knew what they had to do. They pretty much said, hey, execute Order 66. That's what happened. Come on, man. Christianity came with reading and writing. As a ruler, Alfonso constantly exchanged letters with the Portuguese crown, mostly concerning religious practice and administration issues. He also sent one of his sons, Henrique Canu e Vemba, to be trained as a priest. Henrique ended up being consecrated as one of the first, if not the first, African Catholic bishops in 1518. So all those different Catholic and Christian pastors, who are they? My name is E. D to the O-M. I didn't come up with a rap for it, though. How did Alfonso I get involved in the slave trade? Many criticize Alfonso for participating in the slave trade. Trading in slaves at that time was legal. Even in African society, slaves were to be found mostly as prisoners of war, but they were treated differently than those shipped away. They were still regarded as human beings, and in some cases, see their rights and freedom restored. Bro, are you kidding me? So, if they actually shipped their ass away, then they really was not trying to mess with you. They actually had a vendetta then. That's what it sounds like. You wouldn't do your own family like that, would you? Hell no. I wonder what haplogroup these people are. Oh my gosh, bro. Come on now. The Portuguese crown considered slaves to be the country's most valuable resource, and Alfonso accepted to trade in slaves, not fully aware of the impact of slavery, in exchange for Portugal's support in setting up an administrative system and building religious institutions. This guy's a bastard, bro. Oh my gosh. Now, people would consider him a huge blown sellout, but he's not selling out anyone. He's not selling out his own people, but he is selling out probably his brother. Because obviously there's a connection with the children of Israel there, but there's also a connection with the children of Edom. And we're going to speak on that in the next part. What the children of Israel, particularly of Judah and the different states of Judah, and what they had to do with the Edomites and what happened. How did the tribe of Judah get intertwined with Esau? How? We're going to discuss that in the next part probably. Did Alfonso I think twice about the slave trade? With new plantations in Sao Tome demanding huge numbers and laborers, okay, make an excuse for him, go ahead. The hunger for slaves grew, and soon after the trade got out of control, Alfonso tried to rein it in. In a letter he wrote to Portugal's King João III in 1526, he was vocal about the trade was gradually depleting his kingdom and how he wanted to stop it. Our kingdom is being completely depopulated, and your highness should not agree with this, he pointed out, stressing that it is our will that in these kingdoms there should not be any trade of slaves nor outlet for them. So I guess when they start asking for his people, that's they're like, all right, chill. Yo, G-Mac, chill, bro, chill. That's what happened, at least in my opinion. Or maybe, he actually started to feel bad. That's a possibility. Some of the Indians on this East Coast, after they were selling my ancestors, maybe they start to feel bad too, like the Yamasee and the Gullah. Maybe they start to feel bad because those are the ones who were selling my people on Edisto Island. That's what they did. So maybe they start to feel bad. I don't know. Yeah, those black Indians, those African Indians, by the way, the Yamasee who connect back with Wanubia and all that. Yeah, that's how it was. They were selling my ancestors. So maybe they started to feel bad. I don't know. Because some of the tribes, they stopped helping them when they started to, help the Indians that they sold out. And while they didn't kill them, and while they did not eradicate them, they stopped giving them benefits. And now today, they're just like, yeah, we aboriginals. let's continue. In fact, hold on, let me give this a pause real quick. Alright, and we're back. Oh, let's move this mic. Alright, let's continue. Damn, this thing won't stay. A desire for glory and profit from trade, missionary zeal, and considerations of global strategy brought Portuguese navigators to the West African coast, in the late 15th century. Locked in a seemingly interminable crusading war with Muslim Morocco, the Portuguese conceived of a plan whereby maritime expansion might bypass the Islamic world and open new markets that would result in commercial gain. They hoped to tap the fabled Saharan gold trade, establish a sea route around Africa to India, and link up with the mysterious Christian kingdom of Prester John. Wait, hold on. Now we caught them. We got them. I thought they were going to the Americas to find India. So if they're trying to find India, then damn, the Spanish would have already got to it then. Right? Now we see the lie. Come on now. Anyway. Of course, we know what India meant. And what India meant back then. It was talking about pretty much the Indies. Or the islands of the Indies. Or what they called paradise. Which was beyond the ocean. That they were separate from. You know, after we took our holy land, you know, at some point the Most High separated us. I don't think it was before the Exodus, obviously, but, you know, sometime after the Exodus, whenever it was. Let me see. And link up with the mysterious Christian kingdom of Prester John. The Portuguese achieved all these goals. They obtained access to the gold trade by trading along the Gulf of Guinea, establishing a base at El Mina, the mine, on the Gold Coast, Ghana, and they made their way into the Indian Ocean, militarily securing a monopoly of the spice trade. Even the Christian kingdom turned out to be real. It was Ethiopia, although Portuguese adventurers there turned sour very quickly. Portugal's lasting legacy for Nigeria, however, was its initiation of the transatlantic slave trade. By 1471, Portuguese ships had the West African coast south as far as the Niger Delta, although they did not know that it was the Delta. And in 1481, emissaries from the King of Portugal visited the court of the Oba of Benin. For a time, Portugal, and that's the king, by the way. That's like their high priest. For a time, Portugal and Benin maintained close relations. So you think the Spanish gave a damn about some Saba Inca? Nah, they just came and took his stuff. They weren't trying to cut deals with them. They were trying to take their stuff. I want you guys to realize this. They were not trying to cut deals with us. They were trying to take our stuff. They were willing to let the West Africans be West Africans. They weren't going to let us do it. And the West Africans sold, whether it was our people or other people, into slavery. Or indentured servants, or whatever. In fact, I shouldn't say that. Because some people came as indentured servants, some people came willingly. So I shouldn't even say that. They were prisoners of war. So if you want to consider those as servants or slaves, yes. Let me see where I was. For a time, Portugal and Benin came to be spoken at the Oba's court. Guato, the port of Benin, became a depot to handle the peppers, ivory, and increasing numbers of slaves offered by the Oba in exchange for coral beads. Textile imports from India. They sold us for beads, bro. And you trying to claim these Negroes? No, it's because you're one of them. That's probably why. Y'all gotta pay attention, man. European manufactured articles, including tools and weapons, manillas, brass and bronze bracelets that were used as currency and also were melted down for objects, art. Portugal also may have been the first European power to import cowrie shells, which were the currency of the far interior. Benin profited from its close ties with the Portuguese and exploited the firearms brought to them to tighten its hold on the lower Niger area. The two factors checked the spread of Portuguese influence and the continued expansion of Benin. However, first, Portugal stopped buying pepper because of the availability of other spices in the Indian Ocean region. Second, Benin placed an embargo on the export of slaves, thereby isolating itself from the growth of what was to become the major export from the Nigerian coast for 300 years. Benin continued to capture slaves and employ them in its domestic economy, but the Edo state remained unique among Nigerian policies and refusing to participate in the transatlantic trade. In the long run, Benin remained relatively isolated from the major changes along the Nigerian coast. Really, so why was their language all in the slave traders' language? Explain. I want to know. If they were so standoffish, why were they so chummy with the Portuguese? Why is their language so entrenched in that Creole or slave language? If they're so unique. And why the Edo in particular? Something's not right here, man. That's that intuition flaring up, man. That's that discernment flaring up. There's something not right here. The Portuguese initially brought slaves for resale on the Gold Coast, where slaves were traded for gold. For this reason, the southwestern coast of Nigeria and neighboring parts of the present-day Republic of Benin, not to be confused with the Kingdom of Benin, became known as the Slave Coast. When the African coast began to supply slaves to the Americas in the last third of the 16th century, the Portuguese continued to look to the Bight of Benin as one of its sources of supply. By then, they were concentrating activities on the Anguillan coast, which supplied roughly 40% of all slaves shipped to the Americas. Yeah, I don't know if they're shipped to the Americas. Excuse me. I'm not saying none were, but how many were? I'm not so sure about that number. In fact, the quote-unquote black population of Brazil is not all that high. You know, as far as like in the bigger cities like Sao Paulo and Rio de Janeiro, you know, they're not all that high in comparison to the European invaders that came there, you know. But then again, they've done a lot of, you know, killing and brutality, man. And bro, like, our people in South America had it bad, bro. Like, they really had it bad, and they still have it bad, man. Like, bro, in comparison to many of the people in South America and Mexico, because even in Brazil, those quote-unquote black people that came there, a lot of them had way higher positions than the natives. I've went over this in the Francisco Pizarro video, but I didn't catch it because I didn't think that pretty much a lot of Esau was black back then. But now I'm thinking back and I'm like, wait a minute, hold on. How come these black people were the quote-unquote liaison between the white people and the indigenous peoples? And the only way that they wouldn't be is if they went from indigenous to mestizo, meaning they married into white people. Then they can start to be seen as something, you know, on a higher class than a so-called black person. But full-blooded or higher-blooded indigenous people, no, they were actually treated worse than black people in places like Peru. They were poorer than them, treated worse than them. So that's just how it goes, man. And this stuff gets crazy. And of course, if they're enslaving people, they're going to put in laws that will keep people enslaved. Like, people are confused. Well, if Edom is black, then, you know, how come black people aren't ruling the world? Because a lot of these so-called people you think are white were black 500, not even 500, a few hundred years ago. and some of them are still among the black population. And they can tell who people are, like, not the common folk. Like, okay, they might get called nigger at the grocery store, but you know, the government know what it is. They have real power behind the scenes. So we gotta open our minds, man. Let me see. The Portuguese monopoly on West African trade was broken at the end of the 16th century when Portugal's influence was challenged by the rising naval power of the Netherlands. The Dutch took over Portuguese trading stations on the coast that were the source of slaves for the Americas. French and English competition later undermined the Dutch position. And Kurt Mayo's doing a lot of digging on this stuff, bro. He is doing a lot of digging on this stuff. And we're getting closer to the truth. Although slave ports from Lagos to Calabar would see the flags of many other European maritime countries, including Denmark, Sweden, and Brandenburg, and the North American colonies. Britain became the dominant slaving power in the 18th century. Its ships handled 2/5 of the transatlantic traffic during the century. The Portuguese and French were responsible for another 2/5. 1 second. Alright. Nigeria kept its important position in the slave trade throughout the great expansion of the transatlantic trade after the middle of the 17th century. Slightly more slaves came from the Nigerian coast than from Angola in the 18th century, while in the 19th century, perhaps 30% of all slaves sent across the Atlantic came from Nigeria. Over the period of the whole trade, more than 3.5 million slaves were shipped from Nigeria to the Americas. Okay, I don't know if that's true or not. I just cannot see that bro, that number is not accurate, bro. Like, no, bro, do you know how much 3.5 million people are? What boat were they making that was that big? And they just packed them in sardine cans? Bro, they will die in a few days. Like, that doesn't make any sense to me. Anyway, most of the slaves were Igbo and Yoruba, with significant concentrations of Hausa, Ibibio, and other Ibibio and other ethnic groups. In the 18th century, two policies, Oyo and Aro Confederacy, were responsible for most of the slaves exported from Nigeria. The Aro Confederacy continued to export slaves through the 1830s, but most slaves in the 19th century were a product of the Yoruba civil wars that followed the collapse of Oyo in the 1820s. And we're going to see what type of people they were taking, at least some of them. The expansion of the Oyo after the middle of the 16th century was closely associated with the growth of slave exports across the Atlantic. Oyo's cavalry pushed southward along a natural break in the forest, known as the Benin Gap, i.e. the opening in the forest where the savanna stretched to the Bight of Benin, and thereby gained access to the coastal ports. Oyo experienced a series of power struggles and constitutional cries in the 18th century that directly related to its success as a major slave exporter. The powerful Oyo Messi, the council of warlords that checked the king, forced a number of kings to commit suicide. In 1754, the head of the Oyo Messi, Basso Run Gaha, seized power, retaining a series of kings as puppets. The rule of this military oligarchy was overcome in 1789, when King Abiodun successfully staged a counter-coup and forced the suicide of Gaha. Abiodun and his successors maintained the supremacy of the monarchy until the second decade of the 19th century, primarily because of the resilience of the king on a cavalry force that was independent of the Oyo Messi. This force was recruited largely from Muslim slaves, especially Hausa from farther north. The other major slave exporting state was a loose confederation under the leadership of the Oro an Igbo clan of mixed Igbo and Ibibio origins, whose home was on the escarpment between the central Igbo districts and the Cross River. Beginning in the late 17th century, the Oro built a complex network of alliances and treaties with many of the Igbo clans. So you cannot detach or attach yourself to a certain tribe or a certain group of people, especially if these people rounded up a ton of people and sold them. The leaders of these clans and tribes. Would you think that the leaders of the Cherokee that they're Israelites? Hell no. The leader of the Navajo, bro, the Navajo are worth about $1.6 billion, yet 40% of the people live in poverty. That's some bullshit, bro. The leaders are not Israelites. Those leaders are Edomites. And the majority of the people underneath them probably are Israelites who are poor and down and out. And that's kind of the same thing in many of these different places. So, hey, as it goes, the wheat and the tares. This stuff gets crazy, bro. But let me just read off like some of these people instead of just reading all this. This stuff's interesting though. I'll just read it. Beginning in the late 17th century, the Oro built. I already read that. They served as arbiters in the villages throughout Igbo land, and their famous oracle at Orokuwu, located in a thickly wooded gorge, was widely regarded as a court of appeal for many kinds of disputes. By custom, the Oro were sacrosanct, allowing them to travel anywhere with their goods without fear of attack. Alliances with certain Igbo clans who acted as mercenaries for the Oro guaranteed their safety. As oracle priests, they also received slaves and payments of fines or dedicated to the gods by their masters as scapegoats for their own transgressions. These slaves thereby became property of the Oro priests, who were at liberty to sell them. These people got a lot of power, bro. Besides their religious influence, the Oro established their ascendancy through a combination of commercial acumen and diplomatic skill. Okay, so they rubbing elbows with white people and colonizers. Okay. Their commercial empire was based on a set of 24-day fairs and periodic markets that dotted the interior. The resident Oro dominated these markets and collected slaves for export. They had a virtual monopoly of the slave trade after the collapse of Oyo in the 1820s. Villages suspected of violating treaties with the Oro were subject to devastating raids that not only produced slaves for export, but also maintained Oro influence. The Oro had treaties with the coastal ports from which slaves were exported, especially Calabar, Bani, Elam Calabari, and Elam Calabari. The people of Calabari were Ekfi, a subject of Ibibio, while Bani and Elam Calabari were Ija towns. The Ija, who we spoke about before, who occupied the tidal area in proximity to the Igbo, had wrestled a frugal living from the sale of dried fish and salt sea to the inland communities for centuries before the rise of the slave trade. Wow. So they had nothing until it was time to apprehend the Israelites and take all their stuff. Okay. Traditionally, they had lived in federated groups of villages with the head of the ranking village presiding over general assemblies attended by all the males. During the heyday of the slave trade in the 18th century, the major Ija villages grew into cities of 5,000 to 10,000 inhabitants ruled by local strongmen allied with the Oro. So again, these people, who I believe are the Horites and the Canaanites, they also were part of the slave trade. They were also a part of it. Some even coming over here to the promised lands. And some of them are your ancestors and mine too. Yeah, some of these Africans are some of our ancestors because they were raping us too. Not just the white man. The Africans were too. Everyone was. Everybody. So anyone who's telling you, oh, it's us, the black people versus the white people. No, that's not how it goes down, bro. It's both of them. And they will learn order. If they want to be forgiven, they're going to be underneath us. That's how it goes. It goes no other way. We have the power. Brothers, we have the power. As the Israelite men, we have the ultimate power. That's how it goes. We're getting that power restored to us. Look what they did to us. Their economies were based on the facilities they offered to slave traders. They were entrepreneurial communities receiving slaves from the Oro for resale to European agents. Personal wealth rather than status within a lineage group was the basis for political power and social status. Government typically was conducted by councils composed of leading merchants and headed by a man Yabnabo, chief executive, an office that in time became hereditary. By the end of the 18th century, that area was to become Nigeria was far from a unified country. Furthermore, the orientation of the North and the South was entirely different. The Savannah states of Hausaland and Borno had experienced a difficult century of political insecurity and ecological disaster, but otherwise continued in a centuries-long tradition of slow political and economic change that was similar to the other parts of the savannah. The southern areas near the coast, by tradition, had been swept up in the transatlantic slave trade. Political and economic change had been rapid and dramatic. By the 1800s, oil governed much of southwestern Nigeria and neighboring parts of the modern Republic of Benin, while the Oro had consolidated southeastern Nigeria into a confederation that dominated the region. The Oyo and the Oro confederations were major trading partners of the slave trade from Europe and North America. Not really North America, but let's continue. So these are Igbo subgroup, as we already read, right? So no, you cannot say that, oh, it's the Igbo or the Israelites or the Yoruba or the Israelites. You can't say that. Because they both all have Israelites in those countries before and after the slave trade. And they were all ruled by non-Israelites before and after the slave trade. So you cannot say that. But this was a confederacy. A confederacy. They are all confederate against thee. To take counsel together. Hold on, I gotta get Psalms 83, bro. Keep not thy silence, O God. Hold not thy peace. Be not still, O God. For lo, thine enemies make a tumult. Meaning, they take in counsel together. That's, bro. And they that hate thee have lifted up the head. They have taken crafty counsel against thy people and consulted against thy hidden ones. Hidden from the rest of the world, the fourth part. They have said, come, let us cut them off from being a nation, that the name of Israel may be no more in remembrance. So all these Black Panther films and all this and that, that's their history. They're giving you a history because they don't want you to have a history. They're giving... That's the history of the Edomites, bro. And the Seir people, the Horites and the Hivites. That's the history they're giving you with that Black Panther stuff. Even the language that they speak. You know, I think that the Benue River, I think the original name was like T'Challa or Tichada or something like that. I was like, what the hell? And even these people, how these people like today, all these black people with the dreadlocks, how they got all these different shells in their hair. Where do you think they get it from? That's a Nigerian Edo state custom. They get that from the Edomites, and they don't even know it. They don't even know it. They don't even know where it comes from. That stuff is crazy, bro. That stuff is crazy. Of course, wearing shells in your hair, you could do whatever you want. But as long as you know where it comes from. If you're like, nah, I still like how I look, cool, just know where it comes from. They have said, come, let us cut them off from being a nation, that the name of Israel may be no more in remembrance. For they have consulted together with one consent. They are confederate against thee. The tabernacles of Edom, and the Ishmaelites of Moab, and the Hagarenes, Gebal, Ammon, and Amalek, the Philistines with the inhabitants of Tyre. Ashur is also joined with them. They have holpen the children of Lot, Salah, that men may know that thou, whose name alone is Yehovah or Yahawah, art the most high over all the earth. So everyone's gonna get it, bro. Everybody. Before the trade and contact with Europeans, supplies of metal were very scarce in Benin, and writing was not present. I don't believe you. After the kingdom of Benin began trading with Europeans at the end of the 15th century CE, the quality of bronze castings and thickness of casting had greatly increased. Before trade of Europeans, blades were incredibly thin, and only wealthy elites could afford work with these metals that were regarded as precious. Writing was not introduced to the kingdom of Benin until the colonial period. Oh my gosh, bro. And listen, the majority of people did not write. You know, we kept things orally. That's what we did. Only like priests and stuff usually wrote things down. The first European travelers to reach Benin were Portuguese explorers under João Alfonso de Alvario in about 1485. A strong mercantile relationship developed with the Edo, trading slaves and tropical products such as ivory, pepper, and palm oil for European goods such as manillas and guns. So they were trading slaves. They were the first people to trade slaves. Stop playing with me, bro. This tiny Nigerian state has driven half of the country's human trafficking for years, and I wonder what that is. I ain't gonna read all this, bro. It's the Edo state. Even today, these people still engage in human trafficking. They're the ones who do it the most. Tiny Nigerian state. Anyway, let's move on. My voice is starting to hurt. My great-grandfather, the Nigerian slave trader. My parents' home in this place in Nigeria stands on a hilly plot that has been in our family for more than 100 years. Traditionally, the Igbo people bury their dead among the living. An ideal resting place for a man and his wives is on the premise of their home. My grandfather, Uramus, the first black manager of a Bata shoe factory in Alba, is buried under what is now the visitors' living room. My grandmother, Helen, who helped establish a local church, is buried near the study. My umbilical cord is buried on the grounds, as are those of my 4 siblings. My eldest brother, Namdi, was born while my parents were studying in England. In the early 1970s, my father, Chukwuma, preserved the dried umbilical cord, and 18 months later brought it home to bury it in the front gate. Down the hill under the river and in an area now overrun by bush is the grave of my most celebrated ancestor, my great grandfather, Nuwabani Ogogo Oriaku. Nuwabani Ogogo was a slave trader who gained power and wealth by selling other Africans across the Atlantic. He was a renowned trader, my father told me proudly. He dealt in palm produce and human beings. You see how these Negroes brag about selling people? They were proud to do this shit, bro. Sounds a little bit like that girl from the other day. Long before Europeans arrived, Igbos enslaved other Igbos. See, that's that problem, bro. You can't call yourself anything, bro. You gotta call yourself who you are. A descendant of Jacob, a descendant of Edom, a descendant of Moab. Because if that's the case, then it's really, well, Edomites enslaved other Jacobites, like that. As punishment for crimes, for the payment of debts, and as prisoners of war. The practice differed from slavery in the Americas. Slaves were permitted to move freely in their communities and to own property, but they were sometimes sacrificed in religious ceremonies or buried alive with their masters to serve them in the next life. Now, again, what did we just go over? If you were like enslaved on that same land, that was mercy. If you were sent somewhere else, they did not rock with you. They were really trying to do you wrong if they tried to give you to the Portuguese. When the transatlantic trade began in the 15th century, the demand for slaves spiked. Igbo traders began kidnapping people from distant villages. Sometimes a family would sell off a disregarded relative, a practice that Ijoma Okoro, a professor of Igbo study at the University of Nigeria, Ninsuka, likens to the shipping of British convicts to the penal colonies in Australia. What? Oh my gosh, bro. Really? So selling your own family is like the British getting rid of prisoners? Really? People would say, let them go, I don't want to see them again. Between the 15th and 19th centuries, nearly 1.5 million Igbo slaves were sent across the Middle Passage. And no, they weren't. Not across the Middle Passage. No. My great-grandfather was given the nickname Nawubani, which means from the Bani Port region, because he had the bright skin and healthy appearance associated at the time with people who lived near the coast and had access to rich foreign foods. This became our family name. Oh, she's spilling all the beans. In the late 19th century, he carried a slave trading license from the Royal Niger Company, an England corporation that ruled southern Nigeria. His agents captured slaves across the region and passed them to middlemen, who brought them to the ports of Bani and Calabar and sold them to white merchants. Slavery had already been abolished in the United States and United Kingdom, but his slaves were legally shipped to Cuba and Brazil. To win his favor, local leaders gave him their daughters in marriage. By his death, he had dozens of wives. His influence drew the attention of colonial officials who appointed him chief and several other towns. He presided over court cases and set up churches and schools. He built a guest house on the land where my parents' home now stands and hosted British dignitaries. To inform him of their impending arrival and verify their identities, guests sent him envelopes containing locks of their Caucasian hair. See, this is what they get. This was the slice of pie that good old Moab and Edom got. You get to sell these niggas, meaning your, I wouldn't say brethren necessarily, but you get to sell the Israelites whom didn't let you join the congregation, right? You get to sell them, these people who are using all your water, and you get to get all the white women you can, all the white women you want, and all their women. You want the Israelite women, you can have them too. You can have anything you want. Just help us. Help you? Man, I'll do it for free. Not really though. Give me them white women. Funeral rites for a distinguished Igbo man traditionally include the slaying of livestock, usually as many cows as his family can afford. Nawubani Ogogo was so esteemed that when he died, a leopard was killed, and 6 slaves were buried alive with him. My family inherited... Wait, what? Bro, this is some wickedness, bro. They were buried alive, bro. I'm gonna be sick. This is disgusting, man. My family inherited his canvas shoes, which he wore at the time when few Nigerians owned footwear, and the chains of his slaves, which were so heavy that as a child my father could hardly lift them. Throughout my upbringing, my relatives gleefully recounted Nawabani's Ogogo's exploits. This is, bro. Again, I don't have to tell you who Edom is, bro. This is disgusting. Do I have to tell you, bro? When I was about 8, my father took me to see the row of Ugba trees where Nwabani, I'm having such a hard time saying this, Nwabani Ogogo kept his slaves chained up. In the 19th centuries, I'm going to say N.O. A family friend who taught history at a university in the UK saw N.O.'s name mentioned in a textbook about the slave trade. Even my cousins who lived abroad learned that we had made it into the history books. Last year, I traveled from Abuja, where I live, to this place for my parents' 46th wedding anniversary. My father is the oldest man in his generation and the head of our extended family. One morning, a man arrived at our gate from distant Anglican church that was celebrating its cemetery. Its records show that N.O. had given an armed escort to the first missionaries in the region, a trio known as the Cookie Brothers, to ensure their safety. A man invited my father to receive an award for N.O.'s work spreading the gospel. After the man left, my father sat in his favorite armchair among a group of his grandchildren and told stories about N.O. Bro, this sounds like some white people, bro. This sounds just like them. Why does it sound just like them? Because they're both Edomites. That's why it sounds just like them. That's why. This stuff is crazy, man. Are you not ashamed of what he did? I asked. I can never be ashamed of him, he said, irritated. Why should I be? Why should I be? His business was legitimate at the time. He was respected by everyone around. Bro, this is crazy, man. Hell yeah, you should be ashamed of that shit. What the hell? My father is a lawyer and a human rights activist who has spent much of his time challenging government abuses in southeast Nigeria. He sometimes had to flee our home to avoid being arrested, but his pride in his family is unwavering. Not everyone could summon the courage to be a slave trader, he said. You have to have some boldness in you. Wow, he's just thinking of anything to where he can justify that disgusting lifestyle and that disgusting behavior. Listen, you will be judged for this, man. This is really long, bro. This is a really nice article. So I'm gonna leave this in the description. You guys can check it out. In fact, I think I'm going to end it here. Video's long as it is, and we'll just continue this conversation later. May peace be with you.